Because the big problem he had is each department wanted to own and manage their own content. They didn't want to hand it over to anybody else. They didn't want any help, thank you very much. They wanted to think that they truly owned their own material, no matter what that material was, whether it was video or whether it was images. They have a very, very old archive of the project that originally drove this was they had a lot of very old documents. They have a collection of old masterpieces, and they wanted to make them accessible to all their students. They were going to digitize them and create them as a central resource. And as they started talking, they found that every department had something to store. And so they went out and actually asked to create a central repository that would have the look and feel for each department of being something that they own and can have access to them. So what we ended up creating for them was, first of all, there was a tremendous amount of scanning activity because they actually do go in and scan documents. There was also so there was a lot of image, so you needed a lot of image retrieval software because you wanted to be able to search by image, not by name, which can be problematic because you want to make sure that when you ask for a moose, you don't get something with horns that looks like hat racks. So you want to be able to actually kind of sketch the image and have it go search the database. We created it for the university. We've done the proof of concept. We're in the process of installing it now, where each department has their material sitting inside their own firewalls. They, in fact, do own everything. They have their own, we've gone in and designed their own kind of portal that goes into their material. That will look like, if it's from the chemistry department, it'll look like something that is made for the chemist. It has all of the features and benefits they're interested in. But in fact, it's all sitting on servers that are located in a building away from the chemistry department. So this is kind of an example of some of the, try to create, take very, very fragile, very precious items and make them accessible to everybody. But it's also to create an environment where researchers can go in and create their own files, their own videos. One of the management tools that's been put into this is if you have an NIH or NSF grant, it will also automatically do some administrative tool, it has an administrative tool that will allow the university to capture information that they're working on this grant. So when it comes time to submitting a bill or submitting, yes, we've used the grant money properly, you'll be able to print that out and not have to constantly beat up the professor and say, so how much time were you on this grant and how much time were you on that grant? Distance learning is also kind of an interesting problem, and a lot of the results that are coming up, I think, are going to change how universities teach. I mean, the information that's coming, the feedback, is a byproduct of creating curriculum and a learning experience that you can track. UTA, this is University of Texas, not at Austin, but at Arlington. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's very much a commuter college. Student retention is again a big issue. It takes students the average of 8 years to graduate, so that means that they actually have a full-time job in most cases, and they take courses as they can. They want to create a curriculum that allows the students to not drop out as frequently, because they can't complete the class because they work for American Airlines and that they send them down to Sao Paulo in the middle of finals and they have to take an incomplete and wait for the next course. So they came up with a plan to take world-class professors. They have some very, very good professors that have won teaching awards, and how can you take those teachers and have them create an environment that they can deliver this class anytime, anywhere. And this kind of gets to where we SGI, we don't call it distance learning because it doesn't necessarily have to do with distance. It's an asynchronous learning experience that can happen in this building, but it can happen 24 hours a day. And that was UTA's approach, that they weren't going to deliver curriculum to the home. They were going to deliver curriculum in one building, but 24 hours a day. At the end of the test, they found that the student who did the best in the class was in fact an airline pilot, American airline pilot, who took the class when he got in from he would be in jet lag. The beauties of jet lag is he was awake at 2 or 3 in the morning, and he would come in and take his classes in the building that was set up. They also found that student retention helped. They had a student the first time they went through, his wife went into premature labor. He was going to have to drop out of the class because he wasn't going to take up the final, and they sent him into this lab to complete it. So they were able to say, yes, that works. The thing that was most interesting in this learning experience for the professor was the thought process going through the student's mind. They offered students the ability to take a test 3 times, and they could submit the best of the 3 times. Well, they found out that some students took the test. It was political science. They would take the test. If they got a C, they would submit it. And the professor was just kind of, fascinated about this. Why would anybody submit a C? Didn't he want to keep taking the test till he got an A? And all of a sudden, the realization hit him. The guy didn't really, the kids didn't really care. It was a pass or fail class. They weren't going to, take another poli-sci class in their life. It was a checkout point. Done it, been there, and I'm out of here. And so it taught them a little bit about kind of how students were learning that you don't necessarily get in a large, a large environment where you have kind of a talking head and a classroom, because you were not getting much feedback. The other thing the professor found out is that they could track how often students during finals and during midterms were going back to a session. So they would go back to reapportionment, and all of them were going back to reapportionment. What did that mean? That meant that nobody understood it, and he was either not being clear or it's a very difficult topic, and he needed to adjust how he was delivering that. So it wasn't just that it was a good teaching tool, it was a good learning tool for the teacher themselves to better understand it. Out of this project, this university is now creating curriculum. They create 4 classes. They have a large digital library that's managing and delivering it out. They're also offering curriculum to the other University of Texas campuses. So they feel very comfortable that they've created a business model that not only takes care of their own students, but allows them to kind of share the best of their breed of professors. They also have been approached by, I guess Texas has a large captive audience, so they've been approached by 1 or 2 of the prisons in the state wanting to know if they'll deliver curriculum. One of the professors said the thing that he noticed that they had an HTML page, they had a connection on one side to talk to the professor, and they also had the video. And the professor would notice when he was walking down, on Saturday, he'd be at the grocery store, people would come up and say hi to him, and he was clueless to what this meant until it dawned on him. People recognized him because they had been seeing him in video. So one of the things that SGI has done is, in addition to doing very, very specialized installations for institutions such as the Texas A&M Library and the University of Texas at Arlington kind of distance learning solution, the other thing that we have done is kind of taken best practices and created workflow environments that help institutions go through the process of capturing material and storing it and then serving it back out. And so this is when we talk about learning on demand. Because again, distance doesn't necessarily, I was in France about a year ago, and in France, distance learning is a laughing topic because there's no infrastructure in the country. A couple of universities have web serving, but in fact, it is not something that they see as a tremendous opportunity for them. So it really is an asynchronous learning experience. So what we've done is we've created these modules which allow institutions to go in and capture existing material, organizing it, going in and creating additional curriculum using templates from third-party applications companies, and integrating this solution into their environment. Part of the back end is also the management and the redelivery, not just in the institution, but into off-site locations. And so, because we're a high-tech company, we always have a diagram. So I'm not going to go into speeds and feeds, but a lot of what we're doing is also partnering between the telecommunications companies and universities to deliver curriculum into corporations. We have a lot of partners who are telecom companies and ISPs. One of their concerns is, what do we do with bandwidth when it's not 6 o'clock at night and up to 10 o'clock at night, when everybody in the United States in that time zone goes home and logs in. There's all of the rest of the time during the day that there is bandwidth that can be used by educational institutions, for example, or corporations to be able to share data and use it in a learning environment. So we have been working with a number of the telecommunications companies and universities to create specific curriculum for corporations that have a need using this infrastructure. So, kind of going back to the fringe problem, so, you kind of say, well, we don't have bandwidth, and so we're not going to do it. So, the problem is not bandwidth. Bandwidth is changing it's a problem being solved as we speak. Bandwidth is not the issue. The issue is the capturing of the content and the creation of the content. That takes the most time. That is the intellectual driver of this solution. Bandwidth will be there. So one of the things that we encourage institutions is don't look at bandwidth as, well, wait till the bandwidth's there. We encourage them to look at how to solve the problem as if bandwidth were not an issue. Because what will the ISPs and the telecommunications are working like dogs to create huge pipelines that will be able to be filled in the very, very near future. And these are just a few of the examples that we kind of pulled off. As computers get more powerful, the same thing is going with bandwidth. There's a tremendous drive to do that. I think in the U.S. They're laying with 4,000 miles of fiber a day. So, and then that doesn't even talk about that this is just the land-bound communication. So what do the analysts say about this? This is a quote that you probably won't be able to read. It's from Bill Gill with the Gartner Group, where he's talking about the fact that learning experiences need to be interactive, they need to be highly visual, needs to be content-rich, it needs to be media-rich. And what institutions should do is plan on the fact of using technology. They should use the highest end of technologies, use a lot of video, and plan for that, because you can always step it down. As a media base, you can step it down to a 28.8 modem. But when the bandwidth is there to go at a much, much higher speed, you want to be able to not say, oops, I've got to throw everything out and start all over again, where I have to go in and kind of recreate everything. So you want to create your material and store it at the highest quality you can. Hopefully, you can get a number of years of use out of it, and you don't have to constantly be behind the curve of bringing your technology, kind of keeping behind the technology curve. You want to plan for the fact that the technology will meet and exceed your expectations. So that's a little bit about what SGI has been doing in this marketplace. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Why don't you tell us of validation studies of synchronous versus asynchronous instruction?
Well, there are a lot of studies out there. I mean, I think that the last one I saw was done by the American Society of Engineering Educators, and it was talking about and I don't have the data, but it was kind of like kids that were taking web-based studies only as opposed to taking just classrooms were doing better. So kids that were taking web only were doing better than kids in classrooms. But the kids that were getting the best grades were the ones that were using a combination, where they were sitting in a classroom environment and using the curriculum as a study tool. Those were the students that were retaining the most information.
Would it be possible for you to get me a reference to that?
Sure, I should have brought it with me. But there's a number of studies. That's just kind of one of them that I've seen. Yeah.
You're early in the presentation, you claimed that students do 30% better, and time
Right, it's compressed by
learning time could be decreased by 40% or
I think
something
that's
like
through
that. If you have
Syllabus
some
magazine.
citations for that, I'd really
Yes,
like to see that.
Syllabus magazine, I believe. I can get that to you. It's a study they did.
A study?
Yes.
Only one?
Well, it was an article in Syllabus. I don't know how many studies they referred to.
Okay, I'd really like to see that.
Sure. If you just drop me a business card, I'll get them to you. So there are a lot of studies being done, a lot of studies that are in the process of being used right now to look at that. I guess it's kind of like statistics. You can kind of interpret them any way you want. Some people feel, I know I talked to a couple of professors, they feel that if they're not in the classroom, that they have a much more meaningful relationship with students in the classroom. Then when you talk to them, you find out typically in a classroom they might have 100 students. So how much type of relationship are you having with them? Well, they see them every day, and so they're actually seeing them. Some of the professors that have actually moved to using this type of University of Texas at Arlington environment, what this teacher found is he was actually having communications through emails. He was actually having conversations that were at a much more intellectual level, which showed that they were actually, instead of just asking a question like, what is, so why do we have that type of state line, they were actually having a dialogue. And he found that the students that were talking to him, their understanding was at a much deeper level than he would find in a classroom and hallway environment.
Are you familiar with the work that Curtis Bonk has done at Indiana University?
In where?
At Indiana University.
No, not in particular. So I'd be interested in picking that up. Again, we're not out we're not kind of telling universities what infrastructure to do. We're kind of a tool that universities are using. We're a technology company. We're not an education company. We're not creating curriculum. We just find that universities are moving to using technology in their learning environment. And a lot of what we find is kind of best practices. I have to tell you, there's no one solution. Every university you go, some universities feel just putting the syllabus on the web, that's kind of, they've done it. And others are much more, there's another survey where something like 2/3 of all universities in the United States are participating in distance learning. It's kind of like, whoa, I must have gone to the 1/3 that they're not, because I'm not seeing it. But if you read the article, what it further tells you is, oh, guess what? It's a matter of degree. It's the syllabus on the web, as opposed to a full curriculum being developed. There are a number of initiatives that we're seeing for content being created for homeschooling, and there are a number of for-profit companies creating curriculum. There's some for-profit organizations creating curriculum for accreditation. There's Knowledge Universe, what's that going to be with Michael Milken. But I think that universities need to solve their own problems, and every university has their own set of opportunities and problems, and technology can be kind of done with a mix or match to fit into any type of environment to solve a particular problem. Yes?
And if the universities don't solve their own problems, are they going to be co-opted by these for-profit?
I don't know, you tell me. I know that I was in a university in the Midwest, and they were very concerned about engineering degrees being offered from a more prestigious institution than they are over the web. Like why are somebody going to come to me and not go? Do I think universities are going to shut down? No way. I think what you're doing is allowing you to expand the horizons and the impact that you can have to maybe the older student or the student. There are a lot of people who don't have college degrees who would like to have it, who don't have the time to go back to college. So I think I don't think it's going to put universities out of business. I think that the way you look at it, the 18 to 22-year-olds probably learn better in a very controlled environment. A 32-year-old who doesn't have time to go back to school, you're not going to really have access to that person anyway, unless you had something that you could offer them. Yes?
And you may not be able to answer this, but since John's here, maybe he can.
Okay.
What are the, there's some accreditation issues.
Yes, there are.
That everyone's concerned about. So, if I offer a course on the web, whether it's learning on demand or or distance learning,
Mhm.
I define those, synchronous or asynchronous. What's the ABA going to